All right, I think we might make a start. I'm Michael Thomason from TEQSA. It's my pleasure to introduce Amanda White from UTS, who's asking the interesting question, can academic integrity be taught using a board game? And I'm interested to find out the answer.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Michael. I want to thank everybody for coming along. I know it's lunchtime, so we'll have people dipping in and out. But my name is Amanda White. I almost said to somebody today, I'm a factory worker, but I meant faculty academic.
A little bit different.
Sometimes it feels sort of similar.
Yeah.
But if you follow me on Twitter, I'm Amanda's Audit, my details are up there. But my story of woe about how I got into this area is pinned as my tweet. And it started with increased rates of academic misconduct. And this is part of a little flyer that I have for my students, because in one semester, I came back from maternity leave. We have a great authentic assessment to help students develop communication skills and employability. It has flipped learning, it has learning support, it has testimonials of students telling people how great it is, how it helped them get the job, how it helped them develop all of these super skills that they need for employment. And I still found 16% of students cheating. And it's a video interview, so it's sort of like going for a job interview, but it's an asynchronous video tool. You sit there in your bedroom or your office, it flashes up a question, you have 2 minutes to think about the answer, and then off you go. So these are used more and more by firms to help screen candidates. Rather than look through CVs, they want to know how people communicate, because communication, according to LinkedIn, is the #1 skill that employers are looking for, no matter what industry, whether it's accounting or health, or engineering, it's communication, then it's teamwork and collaborative skills, it's critical thinking, and discipline-specific knowledge often comes down quite low. So they cheated in this task. And even though they knew they were being videoed, they took little post-it notes and stuck them around their webcams and gave me answers to questions from the previous 2 semesters, instead of the new questions that I had written for them that particular semester. Now, students are also put into one of 10 random groups, so they don't know what question they're going to get until they turn on the computer and they start the assessment task. And they can't stop and come back. So it is the easiest and the hardest 6 minutes or 8 minutes of their entire assessment process. They say it's great because it's over so quickly, but it's over so quickly. So we notice students looking around, what are they looking at? And so we ran text analysis on all 300 and almost 400 students, and I had to transcribe all of these because speech to text didn't work for 60% of our international students. Then ran through text analysis to find out that 16% of students had cheated in small groups of 4 to 8. And we had, content being correct was only worth 15% of the mark. Communication skills was worth 60%. So I said to students, you could just get totally stuck and then tell me about the weather and you'd still pass. And yet they still cheated. So when we asked them, we talked to them, they were all charged through the official university process. I spent 250 hours on administration on top of my regular workload. Lots of people told me just let it go. Don't worry about it, let it go. They were channeling Frozen, and I said, no, I'm an auditor. I teach ethics and personal responsibility. I have to do this. And when we asked students about why they did it, I didn't know that cheating was possible on a small assessment worth less than 20%. I didn't know that it was cheating if it was a speech. I didn't know that it was cheating because my private tutor that I pay to teach me outside of university said it was okay. In my home country, this is apparently okay, which academics from China, where all these students that I caught were from, said, oh no, absolutely not. We hold, we've got a very strong academic integrity line. So that's my story of woe, and it got me really riled up to say, what could I do? And so because I'm an auditor by nature, by history, from my work experience before I came into academia, we have something called the fraud triangle. And this was developed by a criminologist looking at financial fraud, but there's the idea that there's an incentive or a pressure to commit academic misconduct. Students feel immense amounts of pressure from parents, from family, especially international students, to pass because it's expensive. And our students don't come from the wealthiest of backgrounds. Their parents work their entire lives to send their children off for an international education to give them that competitive advantage. There's huge incentive and pressure. There's opportunity, right? There are ways to try and design out cheating within assessments, with authentic assessments and assessments that have check-in points over time, but there is always the opportunity. You cannot 100% design out the possibility of cheating. Students get emails. Oh, we know you're enrolled in this subject with this assignment coming up next week. Can we help you in some way? Contact us on WeChat. And then there's the rationalization, which was what we discovered. There were all these student attitudes about what was and wasn't acceptable, and they just had no idea. And even though they agreed when they signed on to the university and they enrolled to follow academic integrity procedures, and they clicked through a whole lot of videos of our chair of academic board or someone equally senior and unfortunately a little bit boring telling them to do the right thing, they just didn't engage with any of that content. So the question, there's two key questions. One of them is academic dishonesty fraud? There's lots of contentious issues about that, and I'm sort of doing a bit of research and writing about that. But students definitely gain an advantage, and there's deception. They're deceiving us, the academic, they're deceiving their fellow course enrollments or their peers, and they're deceiving employers when they say, I can do this skill or complete this task. So it's not fraud in the traditional white collar, you know, I work for a bank and I stole $50 million type of approach, but we still have the idea, I still have the idea that it's dishonest deceit is what they're involved in. So I got stuck. So I went to students and I said, we have a Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation. I said to students, these are our most creative, innovative, think out of the box type of people, and I said, what could we do? And so together we co-created a board game. It was much longer than this originally, but we created a short board game where you work in pairs to move your little graduation token across the board. So the token's a little graduation cap, so we're sending them the right signal straight away, and they have to answer questions about academic integrity, about the university's rules, about what is and is not acceptable at university. When we surveyed students before they played the game, most of them thought they had a 4 to 5 out of 5 level of knowledge on academic integrity. And when we observed students playing the game, it turns out they have a much lower level. So they play in pairs, so teams of 2, and then they usually play on a team of between 6 to 8. It's a fun experience. Students have to answer question cards in pairs to progress across the board. And then when they get to this grey card here, this is like a little spinner. So no student is ever going to elect to cheat on a board game, right? They're never going to say, yep, I'm going to be the cheater. So because we wanted to give them that feeling of cheating, we used the little spinner. It's amazing what you can buy on eBay to make a board game, but I bought spinners to actually have them spin, and then it would tell them what option that they would go down. If they got the thumbs down, it meant that they did something dishonest, and it talked about the consequences. And so those students go down this path here. Now, they still get to graduation, but they get to graduation a little bit longer. That was purposeful because we wanted to say to students, if you make a mistake, you can still recover. All right, this is not the end of the world, but if you can learn from that, you'll get through university just a little bit longer, and then if you've got the little graduation cap, then you could move forward a little bit quicker. Now, this is about a 20 to 25 minute exercise, and one of the biggest compliments I've ever got is, Amanda, the game needs to be longer. We want more questions, we want to play for longer. And no matter whether they were domestic or international students, everybody seemed to have a good time in terms of playing the game. Oh, am I pressing the wrong way? There we go. So there are some results, and I realized when we asked the questions, they weren't fantastic questions, so our next iteration, when we run this next year, we'll have some different survey questions, and they're going through ethics approval, a new set of ethics approval. But we asked them, what did they think their levels of knowledge about academic integrity after the game were. That was quite high, and they quite enjoyed the game as well. So most students rated it at least a 3, right up to excellent. And what went with this was a film, which I can't show because it's 9 minutes, but I'll put a link to the film in the little Google Drive folder that I'll have the link up for again. But we created a film so that they could play the game in a fun environment, learn about academic integrity, and then watch a sliding doors type of film. So it wasn't a student-made film. We actually had a playwright who specializes in making morality plays design the film to show 3 different student scenarios based on real data from our university, real student experiences. And so they were about to make the wrong choice, and it dropped them in this dream scenario, and a very sketchy guy said, oh, let's spin the wheel and see what happens. And it showed students the potential. And for the students in this particular cohort, my 16% were all international students. They'd all come from one particular country. And when I failed 55 of them, because of academic integrity, the knives came out from those students. So every single one of those students, I'm guessing, gave me a 1. That explains how my subject went from like a 4.7 to like a 2 point something. I suspect that they asked all of their friends to give me a 1. I had claims laid against me that I was racist, because only Chinese students were actually prosecuted, because I checked every single interview and they were the only ones that cheated. So those claims of racism went to my Deputy Vice Chancellor, they went to my Dean, they went to my Head of Department. It was a soul-sucking, horribly depressive experience. But then I thought, let's turn this into something, which is where everything came from. So what are my next steps? And I've kept my presentation short because I want to have time for more questions, is we're revising the survey questions and we're going to do more in terms of measurement. We're going to take the academic integrity board game open access. So we've played this with a lot of academics, and when we were pilot testing this, academics were saying to me, I didn't know that about the rules. I didn't know that if your university kicked you out for cheating, if it was a serious offence or a multiple offence, I could lose my you could lose your student visa if you're an international student. But they said, oh, look, this is designed for accounting students. How do I get one for journalism students or for engineers? And I said, well, I can send you the InDesign files and you can try and sort out how to change the questions. And so then we thought, well, how do I make this open access? So at the moment we got a very small amount of seed funding, and we're using a students as partners type program where we're paying our students to actually build the website and the database to house the game and the questions, so that people will be able to contribute questions. They'll have attribution, so this will all be Creative Commons. You'll be able to search the database, pick questions that might suit your university, your students, the type of things you want to focus on, whether that's contract cheating, plagiarism, that grey line between collaboration and cheating, so that you can then create your own game to use with your students. And you can make it a short game, so the game we have is about 25 minutes. We have longer versions that are more like an hour if you wanted to give them more complexity, but that is in the works. And I encourage anybody who's interested in getting involved, whether that's testing the game or putting questions in or using it, please get in touch, because this is a problem that affects everybody. And those incentives and pressures might be different for different cohorts, but there are always going to be those incentives and pressures for encouraging students to go into academic misconduct. There's always going to be some opportunity. We found a student who had paid somebody for a significant number of years to turn up to orientation, have their photo taken, and then sit every single exam over their entire degree. Not in my particular discipline area, but at our university, and that student had their degree rescinded. But there's always going to be some opportunity. Now, of course, as academics, we will go, well, if you just did the work, it would be less than trying to cheat. But somehow that doesn't always go into the thinking process for a lot of students. So what I'm trying to do is, let's change university attitudes. And this is part of a larger campaign that most universities are involved in. to try and raise awareness about academic integrity, reframe the question away from misconduct towards academic integrity. I know at exactly the same time, Valerie from Western Sydney University is actually talking about honour codes, which is another great way to try and engage students in the conversation. But the more that we can do, and whether that's a game that's fun, whether it's campus screens, whether it's social media, the more that we can do to change students' attitudes about academic integrity, then I think we've got a much better chance than just trying to overlay extra controls to try and prevent cheating. Now, that certainly is part of it, but I think it definitely needs to be a multi-pronged approach. So, I'm a little bit early because I wanted to get some feedback. And I will also tweet out the link. So I've even organised enough so that I think at 1:05, I've scheduled a tweet to go out with a link to all the resources. So if you're on Twitter, you'll see that. The QR code should also take you to a Google Drive where you'll get the presentation. We have a small early draft of a paper that we're working on, and I'll also have a link there to the temporary website where everything is and how you can get in touch with us. So, bombard me.
Who wants to go first?
Oh.
Here we go.
Hi.
Have you seen a change in misconduct or plagiarism rates in your own course?
We went to zero.
After using the board game?
Wow.
We went to zero. Absolutely. And I was the next semester after the semester I implemented the board game, I was petrified of cheating. I had nightmares about it. I thought about it all the time. So I thought, okay, instead of sending groups of the assessment out to tutors to mark, I will mark every single assessment of video interviews to be absolutely sure. And I made sure that I had, records of, oh, have I heard this word before? I kept meticulous records, and we had zero instances of cheating. So number one, students are a bit afraid that, they know that I'll prosecute. So part of that, and I hate to use the fear campaign. I don't want to use fear to encourage students to do the right thing, but definitely rumour went throughout the university community really, really quickly. I had one of our PhD students troll WeChat. Apparently I was trending on WeChat. Oh, you better not cheat in audit because Amanda's really onto this and she's willing to prosecute. I got lots of advice from academics who said to me, when I caught these people, Amanda, are you sure you want to do this? Do you just want to give these students zero and let it go? I think there's a question here.
Thanks, Amanda, that was great. I've got two questions if I might.
Sure.
One is this, you called it a board game, is it online?
No, it's a physical game. So we have, and I know that there are online modules, lots of universities have online modules, and I think that all the research on ethics says that when you're at home doing a module like this, of course you'd think about doing the right thing. But the idea and how students get to cheat is a very slippery slope. It starts with something really small, and then sometimes you get on that slippery slope to something bigger. So we wanted to make it a social activity so that they felt like they weren't alone. And if they got a question wrong and you saw someone get a question wrong, you might go, oh crap, I thought that was acceptable. So it was more than just them answering their own questions. We wanted to hear them. We wanted students to be able to experience what other questions students were looking at, so that it was a bit more of that social learning issue. And you had a second question, I remember.
The other thing I was curious about is with the interview, and we do that a lot for recruitment and selection, because you see how people operate under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it an issue with the students having things around?
I didn't mind if they had notes. So I said, in the 2 minutes while you've got thinking time, quickly scribble a note, put it there. But these students had written speeches to previous questions and thought that they'd be able to get away with it. And it was really obvious because they would look over here, and then they would look down here, and then they would look up here. And one of the key aspects we wanted to teach students was making eye contact with people is really important when you're talking to them. And so they even did things like, oh, it can't be cheating because we all said the same thing, but we said the 5 sentences in different orders. There's a question just there.
I missed a bit of your presentation, seems interesting. But I have one question. Do
Sure.
you think the communication issue, which has been the latest topic now, is one of those causes for academic integrity issues?
Oh, And do you mean like communication skills, and we were talking about
Yes,
English language early? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was definitely, we had a great back channel chat on Twitter about that yesterday, when I think the National Union of Students president actually said, oh look, it's a lack of resources that's pushing a lot of these students. And there's part of that, but I think for a lot of students where English is not their first language, they are petrified that the way they're doing it isn't clear enough. The way that they talk to me, the way that they present themselves, they say to me, Amanda, I don't sound Australian. I said, but I don't expect you to, right? As long as I can understand what you're saying, if you've got an accent, that doesn't matter. We actually make that part of our course materials now. I have a really diverse tutor group. They're all quite young, they're all graduates from our university who are in industry, so they work in industry, and they say, we work with all different people within our teams. We work with people from different countries, people with different backgrounds. As long as I can understand you, then you don't have to sound like you read the news. But I need to at least be able to understand you. And so we give students exemplars. I have a great number of exemplars of international students who have great communication skills, who have done great in the assessment, and they don't sound like they read the news. And that's what students say, oh, do I need to sound like I'm a voice actor, really professional? And I say, no, I just need to be able to understand you. You need to be able to look me in the eye through the webcam, which is a little bit more of a difficult task, and just go for it.
Sorry if I may add on.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, microphone's
It's
coming
just
back.
that, I'm sorry to take your time.
Oh,
but
no,
it's
don't
just that,
apologize.
with regards to, I mean, English is one. The other thing, which, since I also deal with international students, the other noticeable thing is they come from a culture where plagiarism was accepted in their places of study. So it's just-
Memorization is
Yes.
often a
So it's
foundation
like
for
one
that.
person does the assignment and conveniently the rest of them copy, and they take pride in it. But they do not realize that it is not an acceptable culture
Yeah.
in the Australian standards.
And that's why we tested this in third year, and I tested this on a small cohort of 400. So you might say that sounds large, but that's small for us. And this is about to be rolled out back into a first year program with 1,600 students. And at one of our feeder institutions, so UTS has InSearch, which is a diploma granting institution where students do the diploma. And this is going to go back into their program so that it's right there in first year, and then also, you know, build other touch points into academic integrity, because you can't expect students to do a module in year one
Yeah.
while they're doing orientation and learning all these other skills without coming back to that embedded within the curriculum. And that's the critical thing for us, is embedding this conversation into the curriculum. I embed it into the faculty welcome. So I say, hey, welcome to UTS. Welcome to this great community of scholars. And that means here are part of your responsibilities, and we talk about academic integrity. And then we also talk about the academics' responsibility to the students. So it's not just a one-way thing. It's our responsibility where you don't have the skills or the knowledge to be able to complete assessments with integrity, to scaffold exercises so that you can learn to do that. Embedded modules on whether that's analytical writing, whether that's referencing, whether that's understanding where the line between collaboration and cheating is, that all needs to be embedded within curriculum. And I think that part sort of scares academics a little bit. Oh, we have one there. I think I still have a few minutes.
You do.
Good, this is great.
Thank you. For the board game, how did you develop the questions, and how did you ensure that the questions were understandable in the terminology for the students who use English backgrounds necessarily when they could, and just to really make the terms clear? And did you also follow like all the different types of plagiarism, collusion,
Yeah.
Where did the definitions come from?
All right, so we did a lot of Googling of different universities, and we compared lots of different definitions. We looked at, so we gathered most information from our own policy. So we wanted to make this about, well, what does our institution say? So we used our policy, which we discovered was very unclear on the rules and requirements. And if I was a student trying to read that policy, no wonder they're confused, because sometimes I was confused. So we used our policy and other FAQs from different institutions about academic integrity. We looked at all different types, from collaboration and collusion to cheating in exams to contract cheating to giving someone else your homework to referencing. So we covered a whole range. And then we worked with some learning and teaching adjuncts that we have who specialise in English and academic language. So they worked through our questions as part of our pilot testing process. We cleaned up terminology, etc. So that we were sure, or we were hopeful, that students where English wasn't their first language could have that discussion. Now, sometimes there is still going to be some confusion, and that's where in the game, the students actually read the question out loud. And so sometimes students say, I don't understand that. And someone else on their table would pipe up, oh, I think that means something. Or I'm not sure, let's Google. So it actually became a bit of a formative learning exercise, but having a clarity of questions was really important because sometimes there are terms for things that students would not have in their general language bank.
All right, one more, and then we have to move.
Oh.
So I'll be quick. So yes, AI and plagiarism can be a bit boring and complicated. So the idea of a board game is great, but how scalable is that? Which is why a lot of people are moving to online. I mean, you expect all the students to have a board game at home across the university?
Well, no. So we have a set. They're kept in my office. All the tokens, all the games, and all the question cards. But that's the idea of why we decided to go open source and open access, so that no matter where you are, you can print this off, buy the little spinner off eBay. You could use like lollies instead of making special little tokens, but there's lots of ways to do this on the cheap. And we thought something physical. We do this in week 1 as a getting to know people activity.
Right, thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody.
It's a great example of engagement and innovation.
Thank you.